Hello, brothers, and welcome to Sigma Old Man Channel. The colder he became, the clearer he saw, because warmth was always fog in disguise. Ever noticed how some men walk into a room like they've already read everyone's soul and decided none of it was worth responding to? That's not arrogance. That's a man who's seen too much, felt too deeply, and decided, yeah, never again. Statistically, people are more likely to trust someone who smiles often. Sigma males heard that, then chose emotional exile with a deadpan face and a thermal heart set to Arctic mode. And no, it's not because they're heartless. It's because they used to be too human. This isn't about men who were born cold. It's about men who got burned so many times that warmth started feeling like a setup. So before you judge his silence, before you label him distant, difficult, or dead inside, understand this. You're not looking at a malfunctioning man. You're looking at a man who upgraded his emotional firewall after too many viruses disguised as love, loyalty, or friendship. Let's unravel the 20 spine-tingling, brutally honest reasons Sigma males become cold-hearted, and why it's not weakness but strategic evolution. And if you've ever been accused of shutting down, this might not just explain them, it might explain you. Let's dive in. Number 1, because they're done explaining depth to people who live in shallow waters. Most people swim in shallow emotional waters, and they're comfortable there. They thrive on surface-level conversations, filtered feelings, and socially acceptable masks. Sigma males don't function like that. They're deep, not because it's trendy, but because their mind naturally lives several layers below the noise. But here's the problem. They tried to share that depth once, and it backfired. They brought soul-level thoughts into rooms designed for gossip. They opened up to people who didn't have the emotional stamina to handle it. Instead of being met with understanding, they were met with blank stares, awkward laughs, or worse, misuse of their vulnerability. That's when they realized something brutal. Most people are not emotionally equipped to handle truth that cuts, silence that speaks, or thoughts that question everything. So they stopped offering it, not out of bitterness, but out of precision. When you're constantly met with shallow energy, you stop tossing pearls into puddles. You stop unpacking galaxies in front of people who only see stars as decorations. The coldness people feel from them, it's not hatred, it's not detachment, it's quiet protection. They've simply learned to reserve their emotional complexity for the very few who can swim in those depths without drowning or mocking the water. And what's even more frustrating, when they pull back and go silent, people suddenly start chasing their attention. Not because they genuinely want to understand, but because they're uncomfortable with someone they can't easily read or label. But Sigma males aren't interested in being decoded like a riddle. They're not trying to be mysterious. They're just done giving depth to people who use it for entertainment instead of connection. Their coldness isn't a wall, it's a boundary, it's not indifference, it's emotional economy. They're not broken, they've just recalibrated. They realize that the world doesn't reward depth. It often punishes it. So they made a quiet decision. I'll still be deep, but I'll no longer be available. If you think they're cold, maybe it's because you're standing on the surface while their truth lives far below it, and they no longer feel the need to teach people how to swim. Number 2, because empathy was weaponized against them. They didn't wake up one day and decide to be emotionally unavailable. It happened slowly, through years of silent manipulation, hiding behind soft voices and sad eyes. Sigma males are naturally empathetic, not in a loud performative way, but in a deeply intuitive one. They feel things intensely, especially when someone else is in pain. At first they offered comfort, understanding, and patience. But they started noticing a disturbing pattern. The more empathy they gave, the more some people twisted it into a tool for control. Suddenly their kindness became a lever. Guilt trips, half-truths, tears at the right moment. People used emotional distress like a negotiation tactic. And because Sigma males actually cared, they kept bending, compromising, showing up when they were drained and saying yes when every cell in their body screamed no. That's when the realization hit. This wasn't connection, it was extraction. They were expected to be the stable one, the listener, the fixer. Meanwhile, their own emotional needs were ignored or dismissed as too much, too serious, or worse, too cold the moment they pulled back. The very empathy that made them human was being hijacked and used against them like a weapon disguised as vulnerability. That's a betrayal most people don't recognize until it's too late. So they stopped. Not because they lost the ability to care, but because they learned that not everyone deserves access to that part of them. Now they don't offer empathy on demand. They observe, they measure, they test. They don't dive in emotionally just because someone shows tears. They look for consistency, integrity, truth beneath the story. If it's not there, the vault stays shut. People call them cold because they no longer rush to rescue. But Sigma males know the truth. Sometimes the best way to protect your soul is to stop renting it out to emotional manipulators. And in a world that feeds off sensitivity but rarely honors it, their coldness isn't cruelty, it's survival. Number 3, they saw the world reward the loudest, not the wisest. Sigma males aren't impressed by volume. They've watched the world reward those who shout the loudest, not those who think the deepest. They've seen mediocrity go viral while brilliance is ignored. And somewhere along the line, they realized this world doesn't value truth, it values performance. They sat in rooms where the one with the flashiest words was crowned the leader, while the one with substance was dismissed for being too quiet or too intense. They watched fools get followers, liars get platforms, and people with actual wisdom get overlooked simply because they didn't package their truth in a shiny, marketable way. At first, this was frustrating. They tried speaking up, tried explaining, tried participating, but every time they did, it felt like screaming into a void that only responded to spectacle. The more empty someone was, the more attention they got. It wasn't about being right, it was about being loud. It wasn't about value, it was about visibility. And Sigma males don't chase spotlights, so they checked out, quietly, internally. They stopped offering their insight to crowds that couldn't digest nuance. They stopped debating with people who were more interested in winning than understanding. They stopped trying to explain complex truths in spaces that only wanted simple slogans. That's when the coldness crept in, not toward life itself, but toward the game. They no longer feel the urge to participate in intellectual theatrics. They'll listen, but they won't clap. They'll observe, but they won't dance. And when they speak now, it's not to be heard, it's to cut through the noise like a blade. They realized wisdom doesn't need to compete, it simply is. And if the world prefers noise over knowledge, the Sigma male will simply fall silent and grow sharper in that silence. So when people call them detached or standoffish, they're missing the point. Sigma males aren't cold because they lack insight. They're cold because they finally understood that most people mistake volume for value, and they refuse to waste their breath trying to correct the illusion. Number 4, they were taught that stillness equals weakness, so they made it armor. From a young age, Sigma males noticed something unsettling. The world confused composure with compliance. If they didn't react instantly, people assumed they were weak. If they stayed silent in chaos, others thought they could be walked over. Stillness, something that came naturally to them, was treated like a flaw. In a culture obsessed with constant noise, performance, and speed, calmness was interpreted as a lack of fire rather than proof of control. At first, they didn't understand the punishment. They were calm because they were thinking. They were quiet because they were reading the room. But instead of being respected for their restraint, they were underestimated, dismissed, and occasionally targeted like emotional prey. Loud people took up space, dramatic people won attention, reactive people won sympathy. The Sigma male who remained steady in storms was labeled cold, too quiet, or unemotional. So they adapted, but not by becoming louder or more reactive. They turned their stillness into strategy. They sharpened the silence. They learned to let people underestimate them and then dismantle assumptions with one calculated move. They started using that calm energy not as a shield but as a weapon, not by exploding but by outlasting. People say still waters run deep. Sigma males turn that into a principle. They don't announce their strength. They show it when it's already too late to prepare for it. They're no longer trying to prove that stillness isn't weakness. They've let people keep believing the lie because it makes their impact even more disruptive when the mask drops. Now their stillness isn't gentle, it's loaded. It carries the tension of everything they've seen, everything they've felt, and everything they refuse to show unless absolutely necessary. It's not peace, it's a warning. The coldness you feel in their quiet presence isn't emptiness, it's focus, it's control, it's readiness. They no longer sit still because they're unsure. They sit still because they've already calculated the entire landscape. And they know that in a room full of noise, the most dangerous person is always the one who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, and doesn't blink. Number 5. They realize that love without boundaries becomes self-erasure. Sigma males don't love casually. When they give affection, it's full, focused, and without filters. In the beginning, this made them vulnerable, not because love is weakness, but because they didn't yet understand that unguarded love in the wrong hands becomes a slow form of self-destruction. They loved people who didn't know how to handle that kind of depth. People who mistook availability for obligation. People who saw empathy as endless supply. At first they thought setting boundaries was selfish, so they kept pouring time, energy, attention, forgiveness. They became emotional bodyguards, constantly protecting others while leaving themselves exposed. Eventually they noticed the pattern. People weren't loving them back, they were feeding off them. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly being needed but never truly seen. That's when it hit them. Love without boundaries isn't generosity, it's self-erasure. They were turning into shadows of themselves, bending to fit into other people's chaos, becoming caretakers, therapists, emotional scaffolding, and for what? To keep the illusion of connection alive, to feel less alone, even while slowly disappearing. So they stopped. They didn't stop loving, but they started loving differently. Now they love with precision, with thresholds. They choose who gets access with the same discernment a sniper uses before taking a shot. If someone proves unworthy of their softness, they don't try to fix it, they withdraw it. No explanations, no dramatic exits, just silence and distance. Some say it's cold, but it's not. It's controlled. They understand now that the right kind of love never asks you to dissolve yourself. It doesn't demand that you bleed endlessly to prove you care. It doesn't guilt-trip you into emotional servitude. The Sigma male doesn't fall in love anymore. He decides to love. And that decision is rare, earned, and never forced. If you felt his affection, it wasn't random, it was intentional, and if you lost it, it's because you mistook his openness for infinity. He loves like a sniper now. Quiet, focused, and only when the target is absolutely clear. Number 6, they witnessed how emotion becomes entertainment for the disconnected. There's a sick kind of currency in the modern world, emotions as entertainment. Sigma males learned this the hard way. They opened up not for attention, but because they believed in real connection. They thought vulnerability was sacred. It wasn't weakness to them, it was honesty, the rarest form of human courage. But over time, they noticed something disturbing. Their deepest pain became conversation filler for the emotionally hollow. They watched their heartbreaks become gossip. Their confessions were passed around like juicy trivia. People didn't hold space. They held on to the story. It wasn't about helping or understanding, it was about consumption. Their grief became someone else's, "You won't believe what he told me." Their struggle became entertainment for people who couldn't relate, but loved the drama. That betrayal runs deep, because Sigma males don't open up easily. When they do, it's a calculated risk, not a default setting. So when someone turns that sacred exchange into spectacle, it confirms a cruel truth. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to repeat. And some even collect emotions the way others collect memes, something to show off, laugh at, or use as leverage later. After a while, Sigma males stopped bleeding in public. They stopped giving access to their inner world. The words dried up. The eyes stopped pleading. The emotional doors were slammed shut, bolted and soundproofed. Not because they stopped feeling, but because they started protecting. Now their silence isn't empty, it's armor. You won't see them break down. You won't catch them confessing weakness in a crowded room, not because they're invincible, but because they've learned that emotional safety isn't a given. It's earned, and most people simply don't qualify. If they seem cold now, it's because warmth became dangerous. Their vulnerability was never a weakness, it was a gift, and they watched too many people unwrap it with dirty hands. So now they keep it buried, untouchable, off limits. Because once you've been turned into a story, you learn to stop giving away chapters. Number 7, they got tired of apologizing for seeing through people. There's a certain discomfort people feel when they're around someone who sees too clearly, someone who doesn't just hear your words, but reads what you meant. That's the Sigma male. He doesn't need drama to sense deception. He doesn't need proof to detect patterns. His intuition is sharp, but it's not mystical. It's built from years of observation, reflection, and brutal inner honesty. He sees through people, and that makes people uncomfortable. At first, he tried to downplay it. He pretended not to notice the contradictions, the subtle lies, the performative empathy. He smiled when people made excuses. He stayed quiet when someone's actions didn't match their words. Why? Because he thought keeping the peace was more important than calling out the truth. But that peace came at a price, his own clarity. Over time, he realized he was shrinking to make others comfortable. He was gaslighting himself to avoid making others feel exposed. And the worst part, even when he said nothing, people felt seen, and they didn't like it. His presence alone became threatening, not because he did anything wrong, but because people knew they couldn't hide around him. So he stopped apologizing for it. He stopped softening his insight just to preserve fragile relationships. He stopped pretending he didn't notice the manipulation, the hidden agendas, the emotional games. He let people feel unsettled. He let them squirm, because he finally understood that seeing clearly isn't the problem. People's fear of being seen is. This shift didn't come without consequence. It created distance. It ended friendships. It turned social gatherings into awkward minefields, but the Sigma male accepted the trade-off. Solitude was better than self-betrayal. Coldness was better than censorship. Now, he doesn't apologize for his perception. He doesn't fake ignorance to protect egos. He doesn't flinch when people get defensive. He just observes and walks away when the energy feels off. Not out of anger, not to punish, but because he no longer tolerates spaces where truth isn't welcome. If he seems cold now, it's because you're mistaking emotional honesty for cruelty. He's not being harsh. He just stopped lying to himself for the sake of keeping anyone else comfortable. Number 8, they don't hate people. They've just seen too much of their inner wiring. Sigma males aren't misanthropes. They don't walk around hating people or judging everyone from some cold emotional tower. That's the lazy misunderstanding. The truth is much quieter and far more surgical. They simply see too much, not by choice, but by design. Their minds are wired to analyze everything: tone, timing, body language, word choice, inconsistencies. They don't just listen to what's said, they study why it was said and what wasn't. Over time, this gives them an eerie kind of clarity. They start noticing the patterns most people ignore, how people use flattery to distract from manipulation, how small lies are used to test what they can get away with, how even kindness can be a transaction wrapped in a smile. They begin to see that most human interactions are layered with motives, some innocent, many not. And once you see that, really see it, it changes how you move. They stop taking words at face value. They stopped mistaking emotion for truth. They stopped handing out empathy like it was a moral duty. Because when you've dissected human nature to the bone, your understanding stops feeling soft. It becomes surgical. Your compassion turns into calculation, not out of malice, but because you've finally seen the wiring behind the machine. They don't hate the machine, they just know better than to trust it blindly. They've seen too many people present love while secretly needing control. Too many people perform honesty while hiding leverage. Too many good ones fall apart under pressure. So now they read people like code, watching for bugs, for glitches, for viruses disguised as charm. To others it feels like coldness. But to the Sigma male, it's simply emotional security. He's not playing defense, he's just not playing naive. He can still connect, but on his terms, at his pace, and only when the wiring feels clean. So no, he doesn't hate people, but he's done handing out trust like it's a party favor. And if that feels like distance, it's not rejection. It's the result of a man who finally sees the whole blueprint and has decided to stop pretending it's made of gold. Number 9, they found that warmth attracts parasites, not peers. Sigma males didn't become cold by default, they became cold by exposure. Specifically, exposure to the type of people who confuse kindness with weakness. For a long time, they operated from a place of genuine warmth. Not fake politeness, not transactional friendliness, real grounded decency. They treated people with empathy, respect, and presence, assuming others would meet them on that same level. But that's not what happened. Instead of attracting equals, their warmth started attracting emotional parasites, people who weren't interested in connection but consumption, users, manipulators, attention addicts, people who smiled when they needed something and vanished when it was time to reciprocate, people who saw kindness not as a bond but as an opportunity to leech energy, time, validation, or support without ever offering it back. Sigma males started noticing a pattern. The more warmth they gave, the more some people took and took and took, until there was nothing left but exhaustion, disillusionment, and quiet resentment. That's when they realized warmth isn't always received as a gift. Sometimes it's treated like a free buffet for the emotionally lazy, so they shut the tap. Not out of hate, not even out of bitterness. Out of correction, they adjusted, they evolved. Now they operate with emotional discipline, no more free access, no more automatic friendliness. If someone wants their attention, trust, or energy, they have to bring something to the table. Loyalty, respect, depth, honesty. If you come empty-handed, you'll meet silence, or worse, frost. To outsiders, this new version of them seems cold. But the truth is, it's clean, it's efficient. They don't owe anyone charm. They don't hand out validation like coupons. They give only what's earned and nothing more. People who bring real fire, authenticity, intention, presence, feel their warmth. But those who come looking to drain them get nothing but emotional steel. So if you're feeling distance from a Sigma male, don't mistake it for arrogance. Ask yourself what you came with, because they're no longer here to save anyone. They're done babysitting egos, coddling selfishness, or being emotionally mugged in the name of being nice. The warmth still exists, it's just under lock and key. Number 10. They understood that forgiveness is often just permission for repeat offenders. Forgiveness used to be second nature to Sigma males, not because they were weak, but because they believed in redemption. They believed people could learn from their mistakes, that if you gave someone a second chance, they'd value it. That's what they told themselves over and over, until the pattern became too obvious to ignore. Every time they forgave, the offense repeated, sometimes with more confidence, sometimes with less apology. The manipulators started treating forgiveness like a safety net, a reset button, a way to dodge consequences. Sorry became a tool, not a truth. It wasn't accountability, it was insurance. The Sigma male started noticing something dark behind the smiles and apologies. That most people weren't seeking forgiveness to make things right, they were using it to avoid discomfort. They weren't sorry for the damage, they were sorry they got caught. And once they realized you'd forgive them, they stopped even pretending to change. That's when something in the Sigma male snapped, not in a dramatic way. He didn't explode, curse people out, or stage a breakdown. He just stopped. No emotion, no lecture, no second round. The switch flipped and it stayed off. He doesn't do revenge. He doesn't argue. He simply withdraws access. Emotionally, energetically, spiritually, you're erased. Not out of hatred, but out of clarity, because he finally understood that real forgiveness isn't about handing someone another opportunity to harm you. It's about removing yourself from their reach. Now, when someone crosses a line, he doesn't offer another. He lets them live with their choices, without him in the equation. This isn't cold, it's evolved. It's the result of learning the hard way that forgiveness without boundaries is an invitation for repeat offenses. That some people only understand the consequence of loss, not words, not grace, not mercy. And the Sigma male is done speaking to those who only respond to silence. He doesn't forgive the same people twice, not because he's cruel, but because he finally respects himself more than the cycle. Number 11, they realized most nice people are just cowards in polite clothing. Sigma males were never fooled by a smile. They've sat in rooms full of nice people and watched how quickly that niceness turned into silence when it mattered most. They saw how easily politeness became complicity, how the same people who preached kindness were the first to stay quiet when injustice walked through the door. And that's when the illusion broke. They realized that nice isn't the same as good. In fact, it's often the mask people wear to avoid confrontation, to avoid truth, to avoid responsibility. They saw how smiles could shield corruption, how politeness could protect predators, and how civility could be used to keep people in line, not to uplift, but to suppress. All in the name of being pleasant. Sigma males don't care for that game. They're not here to be liked, they're here to be real. So they walked away from the fake warmth and the curated smiles. They stopped trusting the people who couldn't call out wrong unless it was socially convenient. They stopped believing in the myth that softness equals virtue, because they know now the world doesn't need more pleasant people. It needs people with spine, people who don't fold under pressure, people who say what needs to be said, even if their voice shakes. And that kind of integrity rarely comes wrapped in a smile, so yes, they come off cold, detached, harsh even, but they'd rather be cold and clean than warm and complicit. They'd rather be feared for their honesty than loved for their silence. Because at the end of the day, nice people let the worst things happen, quietly. The Sigma male doesn't raise his voice to appear strong. He doesn't dress up his words to be digestible. He speaks when it counts, acts when others freeze, and refuses to hide behind politeness when something needs to be confronted. And if that makes people uncomfortable, so be it. He's not here to be nice. He's here to be necessary. Number 12. They found that explaining pain to the wrong people is a self-betrayal. Sigma males didn't go silent because they ran out of things to say. They went silent because they realized saying it out loud wasn't helping. It was harming. Every time they tried to explain their pain, to break it down, to be honest about what was really going on inside, they noticed something chilling. Most people weren't listening to understand. They were listening to react, to critique, to label, or worse, to store it away and use it later. They noticed the shifts in energy, the forced empathy, the dismissive advice, the way some people nodded along but never actually heard them. And the worst ones, they turned those confessions into ammunition, brought them up in arguments, laughed about them with others, weaponized their vulnerability like it was fair game. That's when the Sigma male understood something that changed everything. Explaining pain to the wrong person isn't brave, it's a quiet betrayal of self. Every time he handed someone the blueprint to his soul, he gave them the tools to wreck it. And eventually, he got tired of watching people treat his openness like weakness, like entertainment, or like an opportunity to feel superior. So he stopped. Not because the pain disappeared, but because he realized not everyone deserves access to it. Not everyone has the emotional maturity, the depth, or the sincerity to hold space for real pain without twisting it. Now, his silence isn't emptiness. It's discipline. It's not that he doesn't feel. It's that he's learned who's earned the right to know. Most haven't. And if that makes him seem distant, withdrawn, or even heartless, so be it, because he'd rather be misunderstood than misused. He walks lighter now, but colder. Not because he's numb, but because he's focused. His silence isn't a void, it's a boundary. And that coldness people feel, it's the sound of doors closing quietly, permanently behind people who never deserved to hear the truth in the first place. Sigma males didn't choose coldness as a personality. They arrived there through survival. Every scar taught them something. Every betrayal rewired something. Every time their warmth was mistaken for weakness, they adjusted. What you see now isn't a lack of emotion. It's a man who's learned to filter his fire through ice. They still feel. They still care, but they've stopped handing those parts of themselves to just anyone, because the world taught them that openness gets exploited, empathy gets drained, and depth gets drowned in shallow waters. So they evolved, not to become ruthless, but to protect what's left of their truth. Their coldness isn't absence, it's presence with boundaries. It's love with requirements, it's connection with discernment. And while others may mistake it for emotional shutdown, it's actually the highest form of self-respect, knowing exactly who deserves access to your soul and who doesn't. They didn't become hard to be cruel, they became hard to stay whole. If that unsettles people, so be it. Sigma males aren't here to be digestible. They're here to be undeniably real. If you felt this, if it stirred something real in you, don't just scroll on. Subscribe to the channel for more brutally honest, no-fluff content that actually gets you. Like the video if you know coldness isn't always cruelty. Drop a comment below, your story, your silence, your truth. We read everything. And if you know someone who's been misunderstood, share this with them. Let them know they're not broken, just evolved.